Sausage.
Hello. The lights just did a little quiet on me. I don't know. They dimmed on me a little bit. Let's try that again. Hello. 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 And welcome. 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 2 Second Runs, the podcast where I replay games I loved in the past to see if I still love them today. I think that's how the intro went. I should workshop it because it's been over 2 years since I've done a Second Runs episode. And I've been wanting to for a long time. It's just been me feeling like, I gotta stick with the backlog. Scheduling is not helping me. So on and so forth. I felt guilty. I even felt guilty with this Second Runs, taking away time from games I've never played to play something I've played in the past. And not only that, well, spoilers. These aren't spoilers, but the game of this here episode is Batman Arkham Asylum. In this case, it is the remastered version, I guess you'd call it. It's not really a remake. That was part of the Return to Arkham collection that was released on Xbox One and PlayStation 4, and of course PC. I don't know if the Switch eventually got them. I think it did much later because I remember Arkham Knight also coming to Switch, or maybe it was just Arkham Knight. One thing, though, to get it out there up front, is that this is called Second Runs, but that doesn't always mean this is going to be a game that I've only played or I'm playing for the second time. I could have replayed it in the past, like I learned with Batman Arkham Asylum. I knew I tried this remastered version back in the day, around when it came out. I'm presuming 2016. I'm presuming, as I consume. No. But I remembered playing it, but I don't remember finishing it. However, when I went to start up a fresh game of this to give it a second run, one might say, I saw that there was a 72% completed save file of my own, having completed it on hard difficulty back in 2016. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, shit, I played way more of this than I thought. And to get ahead of the game, because this is all about the entire game, it took me, I think, a little under 9 hours to play through it this time. I don't know what my time was in previous playthroughs, but it's a relatively short game, but it's so dense. It's a 9-hour game that feels like 18 in a good way. You never feel like there's a lull in the story or the gameplay, and that's impressive. That is quite the feat. But you would look at a game like this today if it came out for $70 and people would be furious that it was only that long, even though you can spend probably double that to get 100%. But the funny thing that happened when I completed the game, because I also recorded an episode for this after my first 2 sessions with it, because I played it in 3-hour chunks. And I recorded an episode at the 6-hour mark, because Holland Beat said the average is 11 or so hours. And I said, okay, I'm about halfway through. I'll do an episode now, and then I'll do one after I beat the game. And then I beat the game the following night. I was like, oh, I'm just going to scrap that one. I'm not doing a second episode for the last few hours I played of the game. But the funny thing that happened when I completed the game was that I had the exact same completion percentage. So I feel like it's just that if you basically play through the game and go after the collectibles that are on the main path that you are walking past, and you could just skip it if you want, but really, why would you? You're going to end up around 72%. It wasn't exactly the same. I think I had a few more voice, not memos, but little dialogue story bits than the other save, but a few less Riddler trophies and one more something or other. So it wasn't exactly the same collectibles and all that jazz. But the fact that I now have 2 save files at 72% is amusing to me. I did play it on easy this go around because I clearly played it on hard the last time. I didn't need to prove anything to myself, and I don't think there's anything particularly challenging about the combat in Batman Arkham Asylum and the Arkham games. I don't know what the difference is in terms of the difficulty, if you just take more damage, if enemies take more damage, or so on. Because one of the things I really love about the game is the combat and its simplicity, something that I think a lot of people would be more critical of today and were critical later on with stuff like Rise, Son of Rome. And it's why I think a series like Assassin's Creed transition to the more Dark Souls-y action combat as opposed to this counter system. I love it though. I love the simplicity of just beating the crap out of enemies as they're coming at you in not waves, but they're coming at you. Well, I mean, they're coming at you pretty much a few at a time, but they'll come at you in groups, and you just mash the attack button on all the enemies. It does a fairly good job. It's quite aggressive. That may turn some people off, or it may just feel like it's doing too much of the work on its own, but it's got pretty aggressive lock on where when you knock down one opponent, it'll automatically target the closest next opponent if they're within range, which just keeps the flow going very nicely. But then whenever you see the little icon above an enemy's head indicating that they're about to attack you, you hit the counter button and you do a counter, and it's all good. They introduce some tougher, quote unquote, tougher enemies later down the road that want you to swipe your cape at them to disorientate them. Ones who use knives, and then ones using electrified sticks, electrified batons. I think you can do the same cape trick with them, but what it wants you to do is jump over them, which works, and that confuses them, and then you beat them down. But it's a pretty simple system of punch, 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 punch. Ooh, somebody's attacking me. Counter them. Repeat over and over and over again when you're in combat specifically. Because there are plenty of instances where combat is not good when they introduce enemies with guns. But with your basic melee combat, that's how it works, and it's super satisfying. It's got a nice crunch to it. Every impact of every punch feels heavy. When you take down the last opponent in a fight, it slows down, zooms in, and really emphasizes the power of Batman and the beatdown you put on these guys. It's reminiscent of, if you remember the initial first real trailer for the Batman, the Robert Pattinson movie, the Matt Reeves one, where he walks up to those group of thugs and one of the guys says, "Who are you?" or something. And then he just beats the shit out of him in one of the most aggressive ways I've ever seen Batman beat the shit out of anyone. And it was one of the most bad. I love that trailer and I love that moment. And then he gets up and goes, "I'm vengeance." Something like that. But it has that feel to it, even though a lot of the characters and the models in this game are on the thicker side, feeling much more like a Snyder-esque Batman. Feels like Ben Affleck could have fit in this suit, in this world. But I just love that system. It just is very, very satisfying despite its simplicity, or because of its simplicity. I think there's room for simplicity, because if you can make it in a way that it always feels good, even if it's not the most complicated, there's a balance between making it feel good from a cinematic impact, etc. way, and giving you so much control so that you feel like you're... It's weird. It's weird because I feel like it's so easy to criticize this type of combat system for being simple, but sometimes simple is what you want, simple is what you need, simple is what works. I think of, again, Rise, which I brought up a bit earlier, that people criticize, but I loved that combat system where it was more of this, not Simon Says exactly, but you had various attacks and various enemies who would be color coded towards specific types of attacks, whether it be with your shield or your sword or with a foot, your foot, not a foot. I mean, you can't, but it would be cool if you could chop off someone's foot and then beat someone else with it. But I love that game and that combat system. It was so much fun to just play that arena mode in that game. But returning to Arkham Asylum, that was one of the first things that stood out to me. Is just how much I still love that combat system, how much I miss it from Assassin's Creed. That's one of the things that slightly turned me off of the newer ones. I liked being in these humongous worlds and getting to explore them, but I didn't love the combat. And part of it is because I don't love combat mapped to the shoulder buttons. I'm not sure if you can switch it in the games on console, at least on PC, you could do whatever you want. But on console, I wasn't sure. I'm still not sure if you can. Though, when I talked about this when playing Kenna Bridge of Spirits, one of my friends, Jordan, said that, or made the argument, made the point that made me think differently about being negative about it. And that's the fact that when combat is mapped to the shoulder buttons, then your thumb is free to use the analog sticks. So you can use both analog sticks while not having to take it away to do combat. And I was like, oh, that's a very good point. That makes a whole lot of sense. We can all agree that jumping by pushing in the right analog sticks, though, sucks, right? Nobody's going to agree that that's good. But now I can see why shoulder buttons for combat is a thing worth going after and utilizing and whatnot. So yeah, I love the combat of the game. But that's just scratching the surface. Oh, well, thank you for that introduction, Batman. It's so nice of you to come on my... Oh, God. One, I didn't want to finish that sentence. I didn't want to start it. And then when I got midway through, like an actual... I was like, ugh, this is a bad idea. But no idea how I'm actually going to cut this in to the episode. But after I recorded the episode that you're watching for Batman Arkham Asylum second runs, yeah, I realized I forgot to mention two very important aspects that I alluded to and never got around to because my mind, it just goes and then it never comes back to the point. And while in most cases, I would say, I didn't say this, I didn't talk about this because it clearly didn't have that much of an impact on me. This is not one of those cases. I am, of course, alluding to the detective mode and the fact that in instances where you can't just brute force your way through a group of thugs and you have to stealthily approach a situation, you're able to utilize various tactics. But let's get to the detective mode. First, I want to get through these quick because the episode's already a chonker, a meaty little boy. I don't like that. I don't like the meaty little boy. I feel dirty saying I feel like a sicko. But detective mode was surely probably not started with Batman Arkham Asylum, but it sure as hell popularized detective mode. This, of course, being the filter-esque way in which the art before you is subdued in some way, as in taking away all the color or putting a specific filter over it, a blue light filter or something along those lines, so that it can highlight points of interest or objects of interest that are typically story related, progress related, so on and so forth. And you have that here where you were either trying to find a specific object, or in many instances you're following the trail, so you'll be searching for someone or something and then you follow a trail of someone's footprints or alcohol on their breath, cigarette smoke, so on and so forth. and you do a lot of this just trailing a path with your detective vision. But you also utilize it in combat scenarios. And this is the second point. You don't really need it when you are just engaging in melee combat with the basic combat and counter system and all that. But in instances where you have to tackle a situation silently because the enemies have guns, and especially if you're playing on the harder difficulties, take a few shots from there and you're dead. Because you're Batman, you're not a superhero. You're just a normal dude playing dress up who's got lots and lots of money and can afford crazy ass gadgets. So in those situations, you're able to hide through or sneak around through air ducts, I guess, and under grates in the floor, and you can jump around on the ceilings, climbing on gargoyles, using your grappling hook to get around very quickly. And then as you unlock new abilities, you can do inverted takedowns, so you can grab someone and hang them from a gargoyle and so on and so forth. And those are very fun because the way the AI interacts with you in those situations and how it behaves and evolves as you take down more and more enemies in these confined spaces, because they're very much those scenarios that you're being thrown in. And they also play around with it and test your ability to truly figure out those situations, in that if you focus on the gargoyles and you just jump around there and you use those as a kind of crutch, there is a section where they place bombs on the gargoyles so that if there's any kind of proximity alert to them, they'll explode, so that you can't use them in that situation. And then you have to focus on the grates or weak walls, floors, ceilings that you can utilize to place your detonation charges on, and then either distract or take down enemies with an explosion. And then they also later on introduce these collars on the inmates, where when one is taken down, it'll start making a loud noise, alerting the other inmates to the one's unconsciousness, which gradually makes them more and more unhinged, and you see them freaking out as more and more of their fellow inmates are being taken down, and they're the final one or one of the last few. And seeing how that plays out and how they freak out, even though it's very staged, it's very scripted, it's not organic. You will see the same type of freaking out thing where they'll just start shooting blindly into the sky, into the ceiling, and so on. It's just a really fun way of handling stealth that is engaging, doesn't feel too brutal. It's not an instant fail type situation, which is always the worst way for a stealth game to handle stealth. And that's why any game that is purely stealth and is instant fail whenever you're seen is never fun for me, because you want to have that ability to correct your mistake, to revert back into the shadows, to hide off again and try again, or in certain cases be able to switch over to a more headfirst type of interaction. But yeah, those things are handled very well in the game as well, in comparison to something like Spider-Man, for instance, where especially I think with ranged enemies with guns, I think in Batman they don't overload you with those types of enemies so that you have to deal with a bunch of close-up melee enemies while also a whole bunch of other ones are shooting at you at the same time and are constantly re-picking up their guns and so on and so forth. It's much more manageable, and I think is a perfect balance of close quarters combat and stealth gameplay. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I will send it back to Batman to cut me off and reintroduce the clip or the main episode, however I choose to do it. boop bada boop boop boop. I was gonna do a bit here, and I was gonna do this, and I'm still gonna do it, but I'm saying I'm doing it. So, ba 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 ba. The thing I love even more about Arkham Asylum and why it's my favorite, it's still my favorite of the Arkham games, is because of its smaller nature. Like I said, it took me a little under 9 hours to play through the game, but it felt so dense because instead of being in this huge part of Gotham City, as you'll see in the later games, in Arkham City, Arkham Knight, and Arkham Origins is that way too. I can't remember Arkham Origins all that well. And I have yet to play Arkham Knight, which is why I'm replaying these to build my way towards there. I want to refresh the story. But because it's confined to Arkham Asylum, they're able to really flesh out this small geographical space and cram so much into it and do so much more with it that everything feels handcrafted. It feels so bespoke. And yes, in Arkham City, you still have plenty of Riddler trophies and things to find across the entire city. But there's still a lot of just nothing. Empty space. Just a lot of area that is there for you to traverse from one point to another. Nothing wrong with that. I love open world games. But when you're able to focus on a singular space, of course, it's comprised of multiple buildings, but when you're able to do that, you're able to just make something that feels so handcrafted and so perfect. It's just a wonderful, wonderful experience that has zero lulls. You have a great story with it. Bringing the animated series voice actors was a genius move, even though it doesn't have that look, that art style. Those actors know the roles so well, know the characters so well, are able to really convey and bring across this story. And it's so satisfying. It reminded me of the fact, in the same way that KOTOR always reminds me, or is what made me a Star Wars fan, and when I revisit the game, it reminds me of how much I love that world and Star Wars, despite plenty of Star Wars things not working for me. Arkham Asylum didn't exactly make me a Batman fan, because I already liked Batman, but it cemented my love of Batman, and it reminded me of why Batman is so special. Even though I still think Batman himself is the least interesting character. And I think that's a agreed upon opinion amongst many fans of Batman, that Batman is great because of his villains. And that's not to say that Batman isn't a good character. He's a good character, but there are much better heroes, protagonists in comic books on both sides, on all, in the indie space, DC, Marvel, etc. I think there are a lot of better examples of protagonists. But there's no better example of a cast of villains than Batman. Spider-Man comes the closest, but still, it's not even close. And in Arkham Asylum, you get Joker, of course, and then Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, Scarecrow, and Croc. You also get a little bit of Bane, but I mean, he get pretty much as much Bane as anyone would ever want, because it's Bane. But I think the story is great from start to finish, bringing Joker to the asylum and then having him already have this plan set in place to take over and utilize the Titan formula to create these super monster soldiers a la Bane. Poison Ivy being more of a just let my plants be, leave them alone. You hurt them, you hurt me. And when that happened, I was like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna kill all these things." And she's constantly telling me, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you for hurting my plants." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, and I'm gonna kill every one of them." But Harley Quinn's fun. The Croc section is tedious. That's probably the worst. I would even say that the majority of boss fights are not that great, and the final one with Joker just injecting the formula into him, and that doesn't feel very Joker-esque. But how do you do a Joker final fight? Maybe you don't have to have one. It's similar to BioShock in a way where it's like, do we even really need a boss fight here? I don't think so, but we got it. But the Croc fight is probably the weakest in the sense that it's incredibly tedious. It's not challenging in any way. It's just going across this. It's not even really a boss fight. It's just going through this area, collecting the pores for the antidote for the Titans and the formula. And then every now and again, Croc will pop up. You hear the music, you hear him roar. You look around, where is he? Where is he? You see him, you lock on, you throw your batarang at him, you make him fall back into the water, and he just keeps at you. I'll give Croc one thing. He does not give up. No matter how many times, dozen, 2 dozen times, you knock him in the water, he just keeps coming after you. I'm like, dude, come on. Do you really want to do this over and over and over again? We know how this is going to play out. Come on. You just stay in the water. I'll leave you be. You leave me be. Let's speed through this. But he wouldn't have any of that. So the story is great. It's great for it's a solid story. It's weird because I'm trying to think about specifics that I want to call back on. It's not that there's something incredibly special about it. It's just like, this is a good Batman story. If it wasn't Batman, I'd be like, well, yeah, you know? You've got the Scarecrow sections, which are probably one of the most memorable bits of the game, and how they play around with you in a kind of eternal darkness way where at times, at least once, it makes it seem like the game's crashed and your TV's off, and it's like, oh shit, what happened? Did the game crash on me? Did it bug out? And then it returns like, oh no, this is a Scarecrow section. And that's fun. It's fun when a game can try and manipulate the player in fourth wall breaking ways. And they succeed to varying degrees from game to game, and they work well here. So yeah, I love the story. It still looks great. The faces are a bit hit or miss, especially on the lesser important characters. And even on all characters, the eyes are where it really stands out as like, oh, this is an older game. As they're bugging out and they're like, oh, looking all over the place. And it's like, oh, settle down there, buddy. Yeah, and structurally, I don't think I ever even brought up this point. Part of what I love about the game, and because it's in this confined space as opposed to an open world like Arkham City and so on, and the later games, you get this Metroidvania style of play where you're going through this environment and certain things are closed off, whether it's story related or tool related, gadget related. And as you keep playing, you'll obtain new tools, you'll upgrade tools so that you're able to reach new areas and open new areas. And that was part of the fun of me replaying the game, is that I didn't remember everything exactly, but every time I would come across something that I couldn't access just yet, I'd be like, oh, I know I'm going to need that tool to get there. Oh, I know how I'm going to get there. Oh, I must be getting that tool soon because I got to go there next, and I can't get there yet, but I know I'm going to need this specific tool, like your little thing that lets you move across distances, like a large gap or electrified water. Your hacking tool that allows you to open closed doors, not closed doors. Well, are some closed doors? They always like electrified doors. But it's just an incredibly well-crafted game that came from a studio with no pedigree before that to really show or make you believe that they could pull this off. I think their game prior to that was Urban Chaos 2 of Copperfire. When I was talking about it, I thought it was just a firefighting game, but if it's actually a sequel to Urban Chaos on PlayStation 1, which is a game where you played as a black cop in a very small open world type area that I loved. I played it so much because it was a cheap game I got at Blockbuster. I'm like, I want to go. I want to check out this Urban Chaos too. I want to see. I would also just love to see the game they made before this because of the glow up of that to this. In the same way that I look at something, it's not the same because it's their first game, but one of the more recent games coming out soon is Expedition 33. What is it? It's a horrible name. That was such a horrible name because it's curriculum dual decimal Expedition 33. It's some C word. Not that C word though. Shh. But I look at that and I'm like, man, that looks incredibly ambitious, especially for a first time team that doesn't look that big. I hope they can pull it off. Not exactly the same case again because they're not coming off of smaller games and then going for the stars. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I really want to say about Arkham Asylum other than it's great and I love it. I love the story. I love the voice acting. I love the visuals. I love so much about it. I love pretty much everything about it. This is a absolute top 100 game for me, and I guess to the point of second runs, this technically being my third run, it 100% is a game I still love today, no question. And to rewind just prior to that, it is a top 100 game, maybe a top 50 game. I don't know if it would crack my top 25 because my top 25 is incredibly weighted towards certain franchises. I'm pretty sure my top 25 will have 5 Metal Gear Solid games, maybe 6. I need to replay 4 to see if my feelings have changed on it. I was a little bit disappointed in that, but I adore 1, 2, 3, 5, Peace Walker. So I loved Portal Ops as well, but Peace Walker is basically just, hey, we're doing Portable Ops, but we're making it a real game. No. I'm like, okay, sounds good. And it was. So, yeah. That is going to do it for this here episode. I am saying this all very slowly because I'm trying to think if there's any last minute Arkham things. I guess the one thing is that I tried some of the challenges, and there are quite a few that are part of doing the 100% stuff and all that. And you could play as the Joker, which I wasn't expecting. I didn't know that was in there. And that I did not like. He feels really slow despite being so skinny and lanky. He feels like he over animates. And then another thing about the combat. I should have said this in the combat section. I forgot about it. It's one of the things I love most about the combat and the counter system is that you can counter out of attacks. I griped about this in my episodes about my Attack the Backlog stuff about Jedi Survivor, how I find it so frustrating when you can't counter out of attack. So when you attack, you're committing to it, and if an enemy attacks you, another enemy attacks you, you can't counter out of it. You can't parry out of it. You can't do anything. You're committed. And in Arkham Asylum, you can counter out of attacks, except for instances where you are initiating a ground takedown. If you do that, you're committing to that, and you can't counter out of that. I wish you could, but I understand not being able to, and I don't hold it against the game because you can't counter out of attacks otherwise. So I love that as well. That is something I wish every game had, regardless of stance. I learned basically just about as I beat the game Survivor that there was one stance where you could parry out of attacks, and I was like, I wish I knew this a long time ago. But that is actually going to do it for this here episode of Second Runs. Once again, I am Mark Krishnaz. Y'all can find me pretty much everywhere at PX Sausage. If you enjoy this here show or any of the stuff I do and what have you, you can support me and my nonsense over at patreon.com/PXS. There you can get access to a monthly Q&A, the occasional watch party, some fancy Discord roles, a private Discord channel, and the occasional drop on the Patreon here and there, depending on your tier. Here or there. I always say here and there. Here or there. Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. Depending on your tier, of course. that. I think I already said that, but we're saying it again. That is, again, patreon.com/PXS. In addition to the Patreon, you can find links to the site, the YouTube, the Discord, the Twitch, and so much more over at pxsausage.com. That is the letter P, the letter X, sausage.com. But that is it. That is all. As always, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed this here episode, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. But for now, adios, arrivederci. Bye.